Hello, you're on the Ruslan Belov channel. We continue to analyze the situation on the front. Let's open the map. So friends, the past 24 hours, probably for the first time since April, haven't seen significant territorial gains. I mean, we've gotten used to seeing numbers like 20 to 30 square kilometers gained per day. In May, we saw such numbers daily, and now, for the first time, we have a day when the advance totaled only 10 square kilometers. That's why today's video will be shorter than usual. There are simply fewer areas to analyze. As usual, we'll start with Sumy region, because right now the Ukrainian armed forces front is collapsing there, and at least for the moment, they can't do anything to stop it. Yesterday, another village came under our control. In fact, in yesterday's video, I mentioned that our forces made a 4-kilometer breakthrough and reached the outskirts of Andreyivka. Well, just a couple of hours after the video was released, reports came in confirming that the village had come fully under our control. The advance in that sector was 1.7 kilometers deep and 2.4 kilometers wide, meaning the total area brought under our control was about 4 square kilometers. But in this case, it's not even about the size of the advance or the area taken. What's important here is the Ukrainian armed forces' defensive line, namely the village of Pissarivka and the urban-type settlement of Khotin, especially Khotin, because it's the only urban-type settlement in this sector. That means it has capital buildings. Here, for example, on the map you can see apartment blocks. This settlement can be used later as a staging ground, a base for troop and resource build-up to further develop the offensive operation. And now we're less than 4 kilometers away from this defensive line, 3.8 kilometers to be precise. That's not far at all, considering that 3 days ago it was still 9.5 kilometers. With 2 thrusts, our army managed to reduce the distance by almost 6 kilometers in just a few days. Of course, the battle for Khotin won't be easy. The Ukrainian command surely understands the importance of holding this settlement. And I've already seen reports that, in response to our army's success and the collapse of their front in the Sumy region, they've begun urgently deploying reserves there. These reserves will be directed to the Khotin-Pissarivka sector. They know they can't hold the northern part anymore. It can't be stabilized. So now all efforts will focus on trying to stop our army along the Khotin-Pissarivka-Krapivshchina line. Yesterday's advance and the capture of Andreyivka not only brought us closer to Khotin, but also allowed us to bypass Kondratovka. The village is now blockaded from the north and east, and with the possibility of being blocked from the south, I think we'll hear news of its capture very soon, maybe even today or tomorrow. This would then open the road directly to the urban-type settlement of Khotin. The situation for the Ukrainian armed forces in this sector is also quite difficult. Due to our advances to the west and east, the frontline configuration is such that the Ukrainian troops would be wise to withdraw their garrisons from Novonikolayevka, Vorochine and Yablonevka. These villages are now semi-encircled. And if our forces begin bypassing Yablonevka while simultaneously pushing from Alexeyevka, the Ukrainian units could end up in full encirclement. The forces there are small, of course. There won't be any massive cauldron with hundreds or thousands of troops. But still, no one wants to end up surrounded. So here too, expect good news in the near future, especially from Novonikolayevka. I have some information, but the guys asked me to hold off sharing it for now. As for Yunikivka, the advance there has slowed a bit, which is understandable. It's a large village, well fortified, as it was previously used by the Ukrainian forces as a logistics base during their incursion into Kursk region. Currently, our forces are attacking Yunikivka from only one direction, the north, from Lokhnya. I think we'll see progress once we reach the H07 highway and start storming from the west. Then it will become very difficult for the Ukrainian forces to hold Yunikivka. For now, heavy fighting continues in the village center. Overall, it's still too early to talk seriously about an offensive on the city of Sumy itself, but the possibility is clearly much closer than it was just a month ago. Yesterday, for example, there was a strike on central Sumy. And I'll say this, in the near future, there will be many more. That's just how it works. When the front line nears a city, strikes and attacks become more frequent. That's always the case. So it will become especially dangerous to remain in the city once our forces reach the Khotin-Krapivshchina line. From there, it's only 12 kilometers to Sumy, and FPV drones will easily operate. A direct offensive on the regional center will only make sense once we've reached and consolidated our position on that line. For now, the more realistic near-term scenario is drone blockades, and that is very much a possibility within the coming month. What else can I say about the front? In the Kursk region, the Ukrainian forces are not giving up attempts to break through and secure a foothold on our territory. The result, the day before yesterday, they managed to push 100 meters forward near the village of Novyi Put, digging in among the forest belts in front of the railway. What can I say? Truly a massive result. A whole 100 meters. Our drones are now working on that position, dropping explosives and trying to flush them out. Interestingly, tomorrow marks 1 full month of the Ukrainian army's attempts to enter Tyotkino. Their major offensive started, if you remember, on May 5th, and I remember how much panic there was back then. So many messages like, "Here we go again. How could we let this happen? They'll capture it and we'll spend months trying to drive them out." Well, I'd like to ask, how do you like the results after a full month of daily attempts to break into Kursk region? Not a single village taken. They entered one street in Tyotkino, Chapayeva Street, and were driven out shortly after. That's all. That's the full extent of their results. Meanwhile, the guys holding the line here repel attacks by the Ukrainian forces every day. They're real heroes. Next, the Pavlivka direction, the area of responsibility of Group Center. The situation between the rivers Soleni and Volchi, Russian forces of the 41st Army continue to expand their front line toward the Dnipropetrovsk region. Specifically, the salient in the Orikov area has been expanded. By the way, the village itself came fully under Russian control yesterday. After a mop-up operation, I think they'll make an official announcement. That's according to Yuri Podolyaka. There are also gains west of Kotlyarivka, where Russian forces are steadily approaching the regional border. Very heavy fighting is ongoing in Novonikolevka and Novoserhiivka, which the Ukrainian forces are trying to hold by all available means. But despite that, the Russian army is achieving tactical successes there as well. In the area of responsibility of the Vostok East grouping, the Russian armed forces continue their offensive toward Kamar. Fighting is ongoing in Alexeyevka. For the third consecutive day, Russian units north of the Volchya River have been actively assaulting Alexeyevka. As of yesterday, approximately half of the village has come under Russian control, and Kiev currently has no means to counter this advance. Following the loss of control over the settlement of Bohatyr in Sutor, the situation for the Ukrainian Armed Forces, AFU, in Alexeyevka has significantly deteriorated, especially considering that units from the center grouping have begun exerting pressure from the north. The question of full control over Alexeyevka is now only a matter of time, and not much time at that. Additionally, Russian forces continued clearing forest belts west of Rodnoy and are gradually advancing toward the eastern outskirts of Kamar. Given that Kamar is located in a valley with an elevation drop of more than 20 meters from the eastern heights, providing a clear line of sight into the village, the situation for the AFU garrison will become catastrophic once Russian assault troops reach those eastern approaches. Mir-Toretsk axis. Encirclement of Kostiantynivka from the west. Situation update. As previously reported, the Russian advance to the west and southwest of Kostiantynivka has somewhat slowed. There are several reasons for this. First, the AFU is deploying reserves to this section of the front. Second, the advancing Russian units have moved significantly ahead of their supply bases and are now forced to restore logistics. Additionally, rotation and reinforcement of units that suffered losses in previous assaults are underway. Nevertheless, there has been progress over the past 24 hours near Yablonivka. Russian forces have gradually approached the village center and captured several positions to the north and south. There is also movement toward Volodymyrivka. The AFU still holds the line Poltavka-Rusin Yar without territorial losses, for now, which is understandable, as there is an operational void beyond it. Ukraine urgently needs to stabilize this part of the front. Otherwise, they may have to say goodbye to Kostiantynivka in the near future. Pokrovsk axis, Nikolaivka. Reports indicate that Russian forces on the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration managed to expel AFU troops from Nikolaevka yesterday. As a result, they have reached the eastern outskirts of Novoekonomichne. Moreover, Russian forces have reached the southern edge of Novoekonomichne along the western bank of the Mir-Toretsk river. This has significantly worsened the situation for the AFU grouping in the Pokrovsk area. The fall of Novoekonomichne would be a death sentence for them, and this outcome seems increasingly imminent. That's the full situation update on the front for now. The United States will face serious problems if it fails to address its growing national debt, reports the Wall Street Journal. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon told the publication, "You will see a crack in the bond market, understand? It's going to happen. I just don't know whether the crisis will come in 6 months or 6 years." Currently, the U.S. national debt exceeds $36 trillion. Dimon noted that 2019 destabilized debt markets. Although the government took measures to normalize the situation, it later went too far. A new threat, he said, is the potential fiscal deterioration due to Trump's proposed tax legislation, which includes significant tax cuts. If passed, it is expected to increase the budget deficit by $2.7 trillion over the next 10 years. No immediate breakthroughs should be expected from the negotiations in Istanbul, said Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov. The Russian memorandum project is aimed at addressing the root causes of the conflict in Ukraine and achieving sustainable resolution. Important agreements were reached in Istanbul, and they will be implemented. A meeting between Putin, Trump, and Zelensky in the near future is unlikely. Such contact must be the result of technical agreements. Some compromises from Russia on specific points of the memorandum are possible, but these issues remain strictly confidential. President Putin received real-time information on Sunday's Ukrainian attacks on Russia. The changes unfolding in European defense policy must be seen as preparations for an open-phase confrontation with Russia. Recent British initiatives, ranging from the construction of 12 strike submarines and 6 munitions factories to the creation of cyber forces and the build-up of missile stockpiles, are not just about rearmament. They reflect a shift toward a full-scale military scenario as the most likely path forward. The direction outlined by Keir Starmer clearly signals a re-evaluation of the UK's role as the leading force exertion military pressure on Moscow within NATO. It's no coincidence that London has declared Moscow the primary threat. At the same time, Eastern European NATO members are ramping up their activity. Members of the Bucharest Nine, Bulgaria, Hungary, Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, Poland, Romania, Slovakia, the Czech Republic, along with Northern European countries, are coordinating steps to raise military spending to 5% of GDP. This level, previously considered extraordinary even by NATO standards, signals a shift from economic pragmatism to a war-focused logic. Spending on rearmament now takes precedence over healthcare, education, and social services. The Baltic Sea is being considered one of the potential future fronts. The strengthening of cyber forces and digital coordination also indicates preparations not only for traditional warfare, but for a full-scale hybrid campaign targeting critical infrastructure, energy security, information resources, and sovereign governance systems. This trend is becoming dangerously serious, not just because some are loudly calling Russia an adversary, but because actual policies are following a mobilization path toward a new Cold War with proxy hot phase elements, reports the Telegram channel Secret Chancellery. In Moscow, these signals are interpreted unequivocally as an attempt to impose a confrontational format and undermine prospects for a peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian issue. Russia's response will clearly include both symmetrical and asymmetrical measures, from strengthening the Western military district to deepening ties with Asia and the global South. In public rhetoric, Russia will continue to show commitment to dialogue, but in practice, the country will enter a phase of strategic realignment, adapting to a scenario in which compromise is impossible unless the entire global balance architecture changes. Meanwhile, London has triumphantly announced large-scale rearmament. But the key question remains, where will the money come from? Britain is facing a severe budget crisis with a deficit of at least £70 billion. Yet somehow, £12 billion can be found for a mythical remilitarization. Labour is already considering raising taxes, though that would destroy their poll ratings. Beyond finances, there's the issue of technological capacity. There's no realistic prospect of building all that Starmer promises. Not 12 new submarines, at best, maybe 4, and that too in 10 to 15 years. Efforts to copy Ukraine's proxy-style drone warfare and invest in drone development look awkward, especially given the UK's poor track record in this field. The British Ministry of Defence has already spent £1.4 billion on developing so-called cutting-edge Watchkeeper strike drones. In the end, British engineers failed to properly copy foreign models. Watchkeeper turned out to be too heavy and prone to crashing in bad weather. The programme was quietly shut down under the Conservatives in spring 2024. Now British military planners have come up with yet another brilliant idea: replace all artillery with drones. Yet production capacity for anything more substantial is even worse, and there's often not enough money to buy American weapons. So Starmer ends up making empty promises and using the military agenda as a PR platform. But the effect is falling flat. Labour continues to trail far behind Nigel Farage, who calls for focusing on Britain's own problems instead of reckless militarism. The United States' reported intention to reduce its military presence in Europe, according to Germany's Handelsblatt, may soon become a reality. European diplomats and analysts already believe that a drawdown of American troops in EU countries is inevitable, although specific details remain unclear. For NATO, this would mean more than just a change in troop numbers. It would be a major signal of structural shifts in the security architecture. Changes that could alter the balance of power in Europe, reports the secret Chancellery Telegram channel. This development appears to be a logical step in the context of ongoing Russian-American negotiations aimed at normalizing relations. That's all for today's Frontline and Geopolitical update. Thanks for watching and staying informed with us. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. We'll be back soon with more updates from the battlefield and beyond. Stay safe, stay sharp, and see you in the next one.